Hello. I would like to give a shout out in this video to some wonderful teaching materials that come from the Center for Nonviolent Conflict. And I'm speaking of a series of short documentaries. The series is called A Force More Powerful. And they describe several nonviolent revolutions and campaigns for social change from the 20th century. Each is from a different country. And they help to satisfy this need that I sense out there for stories about nonviolent problem solving and nonviolent achievements, which are often underplayed in the news and underplayed in history books. So I've prepared some images just to give you a taste of the documentaries. See if I can make this a little prettier. So the series is called A Force More Powerful, and it's subtitled A Century of Nonviolent Conflict. The premise is that since Gandhi's time, his example has inspired a number of movements around the world where people had to get rid of a bad government or a bad regime or a bad, as in the United States, a bad, unjust situation with segregation and continuing the legacy of slavery in the form of sharecropping and many other things. These are stories that need to be told, and I really recommend that people watch these documentaries. Each of them is only about 25 or 30 minutes long, and there are 6 of them. If you look on YouTube for this stuff, you'll look up A Force More Powerful, and then you'll find part 1, which covers 3 of the stories from India and Nashville, Tennessee, and Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And then part 2 covers stories from Denmark and Poland and Chile. Oops. The story from India is, I mean, it's too brief to cover a big story, but it focuses on Mahatma Gandhi and his work first in South Africa, then in India. And the work in India focuses on the Salt March, which was Gandhi's great month-long demonstration of how unjust British imperialism was. The Nashville video, which I use very often, teaching American students about nonviolence, it's very rich in stories that are within the main story about how a group of young 20-year-old students started sitting in at lunch counters under the leadership of a couple of teachers who were only 8 or 10 years older than they were. And within a few months, they had obtained a declaration from the mayor of Nashville that segregated lunch counters and department stores and movie theaters were wrong, that had to change. And that was the beginning of change within the city. My friend and mentor, Bernard Lafayette, was one of those 20-year-olds, one of those students in Nashville. And another was John Lewis, perhaps the most famous of those young students. He went on to become a very distinguished congressman and sort of a moral leader in the United States for civil rights and human rights. The story from South Africa, it comes from the anti-apartheid movement, which lasted over many years And to give it focus, it concentrates on a person who was a leader of anti-apartheid work in Port Elizabeth, one of the cities in South Africa. And his name is Mukasele Jack. This is a picture of him as a young man. And he is a character worth knowing. He's a very inspiring person throughout his life, really. The story from Denmark focuses on what Denmark did during World War II. The leaders of the country basically decided they had no chance of stopping Nazi Germany from invading their country. But then during the war, the Danish people quietly sabotaged the Nazi administration and really didn't let them get any ships built, impeded the use of the railways, and the country maintained good solidarity with each other. And as a symbol of national pride, the king used to come out on his horse every day and ride. Part of this story is very famous. It's another story within the story. It was the rescue of the Jews from Denmark when the Nazis finally decided to round up the Jews and deport them to concentration camps. Word leaked, and the Jews were first hidden and then secreted away on boats like this one and sent across to Sweden, which was neutral. The story from Poland is about the solidarity movement under the leadership of Lech Walesa. And this is, again, a story within the story. The larger story is the breakdown of the Soviet Empire. And the solidarity revolution within Poland was part of that. And finally, the story from Chile is an example of how even a powerful dictator that everybody's afraid of can be brought down with nonviolent tactics, planning, strategy. The dictator in this case was Augusto Pinochet. He was installed in power during a coup that shamefully was aided by the American CIA. But eventually he was brought down by a coalition of opposition groups. Pinochet had, in order to maintain trade with other countries, he had to agree to hold a plebiscite on his own rule. So his opposition organized in an attempt to win that plebiscite in a clear and convincing fashion, and they did. Their campaign was called the No Campaign, and that's a great story. There's a very similar story from Serbia about bringing down the dictator Slobodan Milosevic, and the same people who made A Force More Powerful have also made a longer video about that story from Serbia. It's called Bringing Down a Dictator. So these materials are very useful for teachers. And the 6 short ones from A Force More Powerful, because they're only half an hour long or less, they will fit within a class period. That's a very important practical consideration. And in particular, I've used the Gandhi story, the one that's titled India, and the Nashville story in my own work quite extensively over the last several years. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you will look up A Force More Powerful. YouTube is a great resource for doing that. Please subscribe to this channel, which is called Learning Nonviolence, and give this video a like. Thank you very much.